Research is on the concept of islands, because islands means that you have all these famous islands, and I'm sure all of you are teaching evolution and related concepts to students. So we know about Charles Darwin, how he described the idea of evolution from these islands, and he found these birds, the Darwin's finches, with different kinds of beak shapes. So in each island, he saw that the shape of the beak is slightly different. So from there he got the idea of evolution. Okay, so I use the same concept of islands, except that it can be in any different landscape. So any isolated groups of habitat can be like an island. So even wetland, one wetland is here near our college, another wetland is little bit far away. These are also like islands. So what we want to understand is what happens when there is isolation, when habitats are separated by something else in between. Okay? So usually when we talk about birds, we say that birds can fly. This is the natural feeling, is that birds can go anywhere. They have wings, they can fly. But what happens when these islands are far away? Can they still fly? Then the question is, there are different kinds of birds. There are some big eagle-like birds that have very big wing size, and maybe they can fly. But there are also some very small birds, very tiny birds, only 7 or 8 grams. Can they also fly the same distance? Maybe not. So what if there is a matrix like this? So you have the same island, but you have small islands in between. So then can these birds move through the matrix to go from one island to the other? So this kind of islands are everywhere all around us today. We have some mountains here right next to us. We also have forests which are deforested. In the theme book, deforestation is an important theme that you have. So because of deforestation, we are creating islands. So these are not natural islands, they are habitat islands that humans are responsible for. So in South India, so this is the map, the southern India, and you can see by the box. So these are high elevation areas. So these are habitats about 1,400 meters. Okay, so these are like islands because they are high elevation areas are separated from each other. But inside that, you also have deforestation. So that means that all this area, birds were first, they were moving everywhere. But now, this all white area, there is no forest now. Okay? So birds can't move from this end to that end. So that is the impact of deforestation. I'll just show you a small video. This is from the South India. This is the Western Ghat Mountains. Okay? Again, it's there in the theme 1 description. Western Ghat Mountains are high biodiversity hotspot. So that means that there are many species that are found only here, nowhere else in the world. So I'm going to show you Western Ghats from a slightly different perspective. So we start, this is a short, let's say, aerial journey. I don't know if it will move. Okay, anyway, it's not moving. Just have to. From my computer to this, some things have been lost, but that's okay. So one of the other concepts that is there in your theme book is the idea of biogeography and how one area is different from another area. So some of my work also looks at biogeography, which is trying to understand how birds and animals and weather patterns are different, probably in the south, in this part of Western Ghats versus this area of Eastern Ghats and so on. And when you look at the birds, how birds are different from each other, there are so many areas, everywhere where you see a line, there is some difference in birds. So that means that birds are not able to go from this area to this for some reason. In the south, there is a Palghat gap, which is here. Okay, right now there is a lot of floods going on there. You may have seen in the news and all that. So the birds from this part are not able to move to that part. And how we study this is that this is my collaborator Vishnu. We go to these forests and we put up some special nets called mist nets. We capture these birds and collect a small drop of blood from them, like the diabetic testing kind of blood drop, and then we release the bird immediately. So from this, we are able to look at the relationships of birds to each other. Okay, so this, you can see the map here. These are all the southern India, and all these are different mountains. If you remember, I was showing you 1,400 meters. They are different mountain tops. So it will be like Tirupati and the nearby mountain, like that. Okay. So what we find is that for some species, like this bird is called the laughing thrush. There are actually not one species, but there are actually 4 different species, and each one is found on different mountain. And some have not crossed this mountain for more than 5 million years. Okay, so 5 million years is a very long time, because humans as a species started only about 2 million years. But these birds have been there for twice that time. They have been living on these mountain tops. So they are endemic to this area. They are some of the oldest birds in southern India. They live only on the top of the mountain. So this is part of our biodiversity. Again, this example is also there in your book in the theme 1. So what we found is that there are 2 new genus like this, 2 different species. Both of them show the same kind of pattern, where the Balghat gap, this is the Balghat gap here, that is isolating these birds for a very long time, for several million years. Birds are actually very well studied. Everybody notices birds and things like that. But even then, with new kinds of technology, we are able to find out more about the biodiversity. We are able to understand our own heritage a little bit better by using these modern techniques and technology. So now, from 2 species, the number of species has gone up to 7 species because of these technology that we have used. The other area that I would like to focus on for you is this area of bioacoustics. So I'm sure all of you have at some point of time heard birds singing, no? Birds sing. I'm sure everyone has heard birds sing, right?
Yes.
It's one of those things that, musical things, you relate to nature. Everybody does that. But what we are doing is that the same landscape, this is the Balghat Gap, the high elevation area. So if you don't know these areas, I can just, some famous places. Ooty is here in the Nilgiris. In the south, Munnar is here, and Kodaikanal is somewhere here. So these are famous hill stations which are on these big mountains. Now, this is also supposed to be a video, but I don't think it will play here. But yeah, so the research that we are doing in this field is trying to understand how birds' songs are different from each other. The importance of this, so you may think, like, why, are bird songs really that important, or are they really different? Actually, bird song is like human language. So you know that people in this part of Andhra speak they speak Telugu in a certain way, but as you go further north, that dialect changes a little bit. No? So with more distance or with more geography barrier, some kind of barrier, the dialect changes. So the same thing is happening in birds also. What happens is that across the Balghat Gap, for example, the bird song, because I told you that they have been separated for 5 million years. So the bird song has actually become very different. So on one side, they sing different kind of song. On the other side, they are singing a different kind of song. So this is cultural diversity. So just like how I spoke about genetic diversity, it is important to recognize cultural diversity also. So even when we talk about natural landscape, cultural diversity is an important aspect of biodiversity in general. So I think I'll have to change it manually like last time. I was showing a cartoon about. This is now called the shola kili because shola is the habitat where this bird is found. So you can see that in Kodaikanal, some people made some tags and bags saying they love Kodaikanal, and they use this bird to signify that landscape, to signify Kodaikanal, because now that people know that this is such an old bird which is living in that landscape, they want to kind of use that heritage to kind of depict the landscape. It's called shola kili now. So what is interesting about this bird is that it has a very complicated song. Unfortunately, I can't play it here, but maybe I'll play it at the end of this thing on my computer. So you can see that the songs. This is the representation of song in terms of spectrogram. Don't worry about it. All I want to say is that the songs on all the different mountains were different. This was from our research. But in addition to that, wherever there was deforestation, so which means that when we humans are removing the forest and we are creating some new islands, so one side is isolated from another side, so the songs were also changing. So we looked at some forests which are separated by only 100 years, and the songs have already become different. Okay, so that means that you are creating some new boundaries within these birds because of deforestation. So the loss of habitat is actually impacting their cultural diversity. So that I think is an important concept that I want to mention. Other thing is that now we are increasingly using more modern technology to study songs. One of the things that we are doing is building automated recorders where there are some recorders placed in the forest, and it is automatically collecting a lot of data, and there are some engineers who are working on some algorithms to identify different species based on the songs. So then we can do a rapid biodiversity study or something like that just from this kind of data. So the other thing in your theme book is landscape change, and this is something very, very important that's happening around us. And some collaborators, some of us have been working on this. See, this is the shola habitat landscape. I showed you a photo earlier. The light green is the grassland, dark green is the forest. So in 1973, this is how the Palni Hills landscape looks like. So Palni Hills is where the Kodaikanal and those areas are there. So there was a lot of grassland and there was a lot of forest. And this red color is the timber plantation. Timber plantation is this exotic, like acacia, eucalyptus. All these were planted during early times. Now what has happened is that by 2014, the entire landscape has been filled by this timber plantation. So there is very little natural habitat left in this landscape. So you can imagine that it is causing all kinds of impact on these birds, both the cultural diversity and the genetic diversity that I talked to you about. Apart from that, it is also impacting the local people who are staying there because of water availability and things like that get impacted very drastically. So now I just want to broadly talk about ecology and before coming to some of the project ideas that you can implement within this theme. So overall, in general, when you talk about ecology, it is the study of interactions between different organisms and the environment. The idea is that everything is connected at some point or the other. So if you remove any one part of that ecosystem, then the ecosystem functioning will be impacted. And in turn, the ecosystem services that these species provide to us will be also affected. So, I think, so most of you know what these are, right?
insects.
Yeah, some kind of insects. Yeah, it's actually moths. And this photo is taken from Eagle Nest Wildlife Sanctuary in Arunachal Pradesh. So this photo, it's like a bed sheet where some researchers are doing a very interesting experiment. They just have a bulb. You can see the bulb and some tube lights that are put up. And every night or every new moon night, they put this up and they find that almost 3,000 to 4,000 different species of moths that come to this bed sheet. Just this one place, one bed sheet size thing has so many species, and we don't even know the names of many of these species. Many of them are new to science. So what I'm trying to tell you is that birds and things like that are very well known, but there is a lot of biodiversity which we do not know, and we don't know what role they play in our ecosystem. Maybe there are some of these moths are very important for pollinating certain kinds of fruits that are important for us humans. So the ecosystem services and biodiversity goes very together. You may have heard of the latest the Nipah virus and these outbreaks. A lot of this happens because some of those links are broken. So more interaction, more deforestation and interaction with wildlife results in outbreak of disease from wild populations to human populations. So I'm sure that all of you know about the concepts of biomes. Both biotic and abiotic factors impact the Earth's many biomes, and there are major ecological associations with each geographic region of land or water. So again, there was a video which I won't go into now. So some of the things to remember is that a lot of these organisms live in a community, and these abiotic factors, which are not, I'll explain that. So ecosystems, you can create ecosystems in an aquarium, like I'm sure many people have, but it is also large areas like lakes or forests that form entire big ecosystem. But what is important is that it's not the size of the ecosystem, but it is how the energy is flowing through the system and the chemical cycling that matters. So basically, a lot of ecosystem ecologists look at the transfer of energy and how matter changes and cycles through the system. And a lot of benefits that human societies get are from this cycling of energy. Actually, it is also important to link ecological processes to other fields. For example, physics and chemistry. Many of the aspects of physics and chemistry can be easily applied to ecosystems, and because of the flow of energy. And you can talk about how energy is conserved or degraded during these ecosystem processes. And of course, we know how the energy passes from these primary producers to primary consumers, the herbivores, and then to secondary consumers. And this energy flow, it enters as light and exits kind of as heat. I'm sure all of you know all about this, but it's important here to kind of stress on the detritus and the other decomposers in the system, because it plays a very important role in this energy cycle. And any disruption to the cycle actually impacts everybody. Yeah. So this we already spoke about. So there are many kinds of detritivores, mostly kind of bacteria, fungi, and these decomposing organic materials kind of dissolve back into the system and create various inorganic reservoirs in the system. So I'll just touch upon a few more concepts. One of them is primary production, and primary production is basically the amount of light energy that is converted to chemical energy by various plants during a certain time period. and this energy production actually limits the kind of species that are found in a particular area, and only a part of the solar energy is actually utilized by a landscape. So there is also, I'm sure all of you know about the ecosystem's gross primary production, where not all of the production is actually stored in the growing plants, right? And there is a net primary production, which is minus the energy that is produced, minus what is used by these producers for respiration. And only this net primary productivity is used for the next level of consumers. So this is a interesting graph which shows different kinds of habitats that are there, and it shows this is the percentage of Earth. So basically, it shows that open oceans are actually covering large areas on Earth. But if you look at the net primary productivity, it is very low. Yeah. So I think if you just focus, you can see that tropical rainforests occupy a very small area but produce high amount of energy, and so do lakes and streams and things like that. So yeah, I know this is a little bit kind of dry area, but I'll come to some more locally relevant points very soon. So this is a distribution of how energy, net primary productivity, mapped on the entire globe, and you can see that the tropical areas have very high productivity, and we are in one such habitat. So one of the factors that impacts productivity, there are two actually important things. One is this temperature, and the other is precipitation. So if you have high rainfall and low temperature, you get rainforest. And if you have the deserts which have low precipitation and high temperature, that is here. And then if you have very low temperature, that becomes a tundra. So this kind of gives you an idea of the interaction of temperature and rainfall and how that creates different habitat types. So in the theme book that you have, you will notice that there are these different agroecological zones. So I showed you what biogeographic zones earlier. This is very similar, but it is more fine scale. And you can see that the Western Ghats are along this, along number 12, Eastern Ghats, and we are in number 11, at the border of, I suppose, 10. So this is important to understand because it shows the link of soil, climate, and rainfall. Right? So climate includes rainfall and temperature. So that is how you get to different areas, and depending on this, the cropping patterns are different, what you grow is different, and what people can take out of the system is also different. I also would like to kind of stress on the wetland and the lakes habitats, especially around Tirupati. There are a lot. You can also use this very interesting resource called lakeaccess.org, and you can use this in your classrooms. There are many different kind of resources that are available on that website that you can use for teaching students in your classes. So now I just want to talk about some of the wetlands in and around Tirupati. So this is Hari Krishnan is a undergraduate student in ISER. So what we did was we tried to map the wetlands of Tirupati using remote sensing. Basically, this is a rainfall map or rainfall, overall rainfall in Tirupati. And sorry, this one is the rainfall. This is the temperature, and you can see that. You can see that the peak in rainfall is around in October and November with the retreating monsoon. So what we want to see is that we know that there are a lot of water bodies around Tirupati, although it is very dry. So we want to understand which lakes are perennial, which means which lakes are present all the time, and which are forming during the rain.